He left me on a live stage so the world could cheer his name. They gave him lights, applause, and every chance, but he forgot this. I was the one who built him when he had nothing. I trusted him with my dreams, my small savings, my warmest hope, and when he traded love for fame, he thought he had won. He never saw that I learned his moves, watched his lies, and kept one quiet plan in my pocket. I saved every message, every voice note, every small receipt. I practiced my voice alone at night. I wrote the truth down in a notebook he never found. This is not a scream of hate. This is a slow, true undoing that grows from patience and proof. I will not yell on stage. I will speak facts, and when the world finally reads them, the applause that helped him will stop. When he realizes what I did, when his bright world dims, the silence that follows will be louder than any of his lights. Stay with me. Watch every step. Because the moment his name falls from the top is the moment I claim my life back. And that fall will feel like justice, not cruelty. My name is Aaliya Johnson, and I remember the exact sound of rain on our first small roof. The rain made the thin metal sing, and inside that song I found a kind of courage I did not know I had. Michael and I met at a community open mic night in a church basement that smelled like old coffee and new hope. He had a laugh that filled the corners of the room, and I had a voice that came out of having nothing to lose. We fit into each other like old friends finding a new story. We were both poor. I say that not to make the past sound romantic. It was not romantic. It was raw. We shared one small bed, 2 mismatched plates, and so many plans folded into napkins. When the power went out, we practiced harmonies by candlelight. When we had 2 coins between us, we chose the cheaper bread and promised we would share better days. I learned how to sew torn hems and how to stretch rice so it filled the bowl. Michael learned how to memorize lines and how to stare into the camera without blinking. We worked, not because we liked the work, but because we loved the dream. There is a tenderness to beginning with someone. You teach each other habits. I taught Michael about voice, how to breathe into a sentence so it sounded honest. He taught me how to smile for a camera and how to fake a laugh that felt like light. We were teachers for each other. He would say, "Sing it like it is the only thing you own," and I would say, "Look at the lens like it is your brother." We were careful with each other because we knew how fragile a plan could be when you start with nothing. We made small things that mattered. We wrote songs on the back of receipts. We recorded a clip on an old phone and posted it to a page that had 3 followers. Those 3 followers were our family and their friends. Michael had a way of making a line seem larger than it was. He chased attention like a dog chasing a shadow, and sometimes that scared me, because attention is light, and light can burn if you hold it too close. But when he looked at me after a small success, a comment that said, "You two should work together," his eyes had a real thank you. I believed him. I trusted him not because of what he said, but because the nights had proof. He stayed. He stayed when I was sick, when my mother called crying, when the bills piled like mountains. He sat there and listened. That was why I let him into my small room of hope. The truth is, I was the one who fixed the broken things. When his jacket split at the seam, I sewed it. When his script needed a line that felt like it was coming from the heart, I gave him words. I was the person who stayed up late and told him when a take felt flat. When we had money, it was always small, but I learned how to hold it like a secret, how to save a little for the bus fare to auditions, how to slip an extra $1 into the rent envelope so our landlord would not come knocking early. Those things do not sound like career moves, but they were the skeleton of our life. He stood on that skeleton. He built himself on a base I helped make. We vowed to rise together. We whispered plans under cheap bedsheets, plans with names and dates, with long lists of people we would help, with promises to buy our mother's new shoes and to fix our old cars. We drew roads on paper maps like children drawing to the sea. The maps were ridiculous then, but belief makes maps look practical. I believed that one day our names would sit together on bills and posters, Aaliya and Michael. I believed we would say "we" in interviews. I believed he would be mine just as much as I would be his. There were little warnings. He started taking late-night calls that ended with quick, "I have to go" texts. He smiled wider in pictures and did not always touch my hand like he used to. Fans began to speak his name, and the sound made him proud in a way I did not understand. He would step into a room and people would orbit him like planets around a new star. I told myself not to be jealous. I told myself I was building too. My work, I promised, would show. When he left for interviews, I sat by the window and practiced lines I had written the night before. I went to the small coffee shop where I watched people with cameras practice their angles. I saved our old messages and our early recordings in a battered shoebox. I did not know then that a shoebox could be a keeper of truth. On a winter night, Michael and I sat on the edge of our little couch, and he said, "This could be the moment." He meant a live show, a producer who had called him twice. I remember the look in his eyes, hungry, a little scared, and bright. I remember how small my words were then. "We go together." He kissed my forehead and said, "Of course." That night I believed him like a child. Believes the sunrise will come. What I did not understand, what I could not see in the flurry of hope, was how close to the light he would go until the light burned him and left. I did not know that the thing that would break us would not be loud at first. It would be a soft step away. It would be a hungry smile toward the camera. It would be a decision so small it felt like air. But even then, I could not imagine the dark that would come after the applause. I could not imagine the space where my name would be missing from stories he told on stage. I only knew the taste of that rain on the first roof, the sound of our old songs, and the promise folded into a napkin that read, "We rise together." I kept that napkin in my wallet because small things are proof. I kept my voice in my mouth. I kept my patience like a seed waiting for soil. That patience would later become a plan, quietly hiding in my chest like a heartbeat that will not stop. For now, on that night, we were two poor hearts with one big dream, and the dream felt warm enough to sleep under. When you love someone who is chasing the spotlight, you learn to live in the shadows. Not because you are afraid of light, but because you believe the light will be shared when the time comes. That's what I believed. Every morning I woke up before Michael, brewed instant coffee, and checked the small camera we bought on credit. It was always slightly broken. The lens shook when you zoomed too fast. Still, I cleaned it like it was gold. I became the helper no one saw. I ironed shirts for his auditions, glued worn shoes so they looked new, and wrote reminder notes on sticky paper. "Smile with your eyes. Don't rush the line." I was his echo. Every word he forgot, I whispered from behind the curtain. He'd text me from studios, "Need line 3 again." I'd reply in seconds. I was part of his performance, but no one clapped for me. And strangely, that didn't bother me then. I told myself that love is a team game. He was the front face. I was the engine. Some nights he'd come home exhausted and fall asleep mid-sentence. I'd cover him with a thin blanket, open his laptop, and finish the emails he promised to send. When people praised him for being so organized, he'd smile. I'd stay quiet. It became a rhythm, his applause, my silence. Our small apartment turned into half studio, half storage. Cables snaked across the floor. Empty takeout boxes stacked like trophies. On the wall hung our dream list written in blue marker: studio, car, tour, our own show. I looked at that list every morning like a prayer. Money was always short. He'd say, "Baby, just one more month and we'll get that deal." So I worked extra hours at the cafe down the street. The manager liked me because I never complained. When tips were good, I'd buy new batteries or a better mic cord. He thought those things just appeared. I didn't correct him. I was building something I couldn't name. A sense that our struggle would make success feel deserved. There were times the lights got cut off. I'd light candles and tell him it looked romantic. He'd laugh and keep practicing lines. Those moments were sweet in a painful way. We were broke, but I felt rich in meaning. He'd say, "Aaliya, one day they'll all know us." I'd smile and say, "One day." I didn't realize the difference between us and you was starting to grow in that word. I remember one particular night. He had a small gig, not glamorous, just a local award show where he was asked to present. I spent hours sewing a button back on his jacket. He looked in the mirror and said, "You make me look like a star." I said, "You already are." He kissed my cheek and left. I waited up until midnight. When he returned, he was glowing and smelling of expensive perfume that wasn't mine. I didn't ask. I only said, "Did it go well?" He said, "Perfect." They loved me. The way he said me stung, but I swallowed the ache. Little things began to change after that. He started referring to my career instead of our project. He signed emails as Michael Roberts Entertainment, something we had laughed about before because it sounded too big for a man still renting a one-room apartment. When I teased him gently, he said, "It's just branding, Aaliya. Don't take it so personal." But for me, everything was personal. Every lyric, every late night, every breath I spent believing in us. I remember editing his first viral video. The footage was rough, the lighting bad. He looked tired but charming. I stayed up until dawn fixing color, cutting pauses, adding subtitles. When it finally uploaded, I cried quietly, whispering, "Please reach people." It did. The views came fast, thousands, then tens of thousands. Michael woke up to his phone buzzing and shouted, "We made it!" We danced around the room like kids. But by afternoon, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. New contacts, new invitations, new followers. By evening, he was talking about needing a manager. I thought maybe he meant us again, but he didn't. Within weeks, he was busier than I had ever seen him. He'd leave early, come home late, talk about producers and agents. I asked gently, "Do they know about me? Should I come next time?" He smiled but didn't answer. He said, "You wouldn't like it there. Too much fake energy." I nodded, pretending to agree, but a small part of me wondered, was he protecting me or hiding me? To stay useful, I worked harder behind the scenes. I started managing his calendar, building a small spreadsheet of contacts, keeping receipts for travel and props. Something inside me whispered, "Keep everything. You never know." It wasn't mistrust. It was habit, a poor girl's instinct to document. I saved messages, drafts, even napkins with lyrics. At the time, I thought it was just love being organized. Later, it would become evidence. He began spending more time around people who called themselves influencers. They smiled at him like he was already famous. They called him Starboy. He soaked it up. At home, he started saying things like, "We need to upgrade your look, babe. You gotta match my vibe." I laughed it off, but inside, I felt something crack. My vibe was built on honesty, not filters. Still, I tried. Bought a cheap dress that looked expensive under dim light. He barely noticed. There was one evening that stayed carved in my mind. He had been gone 3 days for a shoot. When he came back, he placed a small necklace box on the table. "Got you something," he said. Inside was a fake diamond pendant. Pretty but hollow. I asked, "How was the trip?" He said, "Amazing. You wouldn't believe who I met." He told stories full of names I didn't know, people who promised him big things. He forgot to ask how I'd been. I sat there nodding, smiling like a proud partner, while a quiet thought began to grow. I'm becoming background music in my own story. I stayed because leaving felt like throwing away everything we'd built. I told myself that loyalty would pay off. That love meant waiting through the uncomfortable chapters. So I waited, I helped. I became the woman who made sure everything ran smoothly so he could shine. I pressed his clothes, carried water bottles, took behind-the-scenes photos. And when he walked on stage, I clapped louder than anyone, because I thought I was clapping for us. But deep down, I sensed it. The beginning of the end doesn't come like thunder. It comes like a whisper that tells you to start saving things. Save messages. Save proof. Save yourself. I didn't know it yet, but every file I backed up, every note I wrote was the foundation of something bigger than revenge. It was the groundwork for my survival. One day, all those quiet acts of help would speak louder than his applause. The day it happened began like any other. Quiet coffee, the smell of burnt toast, and Michael humming in the shower. I remember because his hum was different that morning. It wasn't our tune, the one we used to practice together. It was something new, something sharper almost, rehearsed. When he stepped out of the bathroom, his smile was stretched a little too wide, and his hand shook as he buttoned his shirt. He said, "Baby, this is it." "This is the big one." "The big one?" I asked, pretending not to know. "I already did." The call had come 2 nights before, an invitation for him to appear on the bright stage, a live national show where rising stars performed and shared their stories. He told me we'd go together, that he'd talk about how we started, how we built everything from nothing. He promised to thank me on stage. He even rehearsed the lines in front of me, saying, "To my woman, my partner, my muse, Aaliya." When he said it, my eyes filled with pride. So that morning, I pressed his suit carefully. It was the one I'd mended 3 times already, but under the right light, it looked new. I braided my hair, put on the same gold earrings my mother gave me, and we rode to the studio together on the back seat of a borrowed car. I was nervous for him. For us, the studio was huge. Cold air, loud voices, the hum of electricity and excitement. Assistants ran around with headsets and clipboards. Michael was ushered into makeup while I stood to the side, clutching my small purse like it carried my heart inside it. I watched him laugh with people I didn't know. He looked comfortable, too comfortable. He didn't look back to see where I was standing. A producer, a tall woman in a black jumpsuit, walked up to me and said, "You can wait in the green room, sweetheart." Her voice was polite but firm. I wanted to say, "I'm part of this too," but my throat closed. I nodded and sat quietly. Through the monitor in the green room, I could see the stage glowing. The host announced, "Tonight, a special performance from the man who's capturing hearts everywhere, Michael Roberts." The crowd screamed. My stomach tightened. He walked out, confident, beautiful, shining. The lights hit him like a halo. And then he started talking. They asked about his journey, how he started, how he found inspiration. He said, "I've always been self-driven. From day one, I knew I had it in me." My heart skipped. Self-driven? He smiled into the camera and said, "It was just me, my dream, and a whole lot of hard work." The audience clapped. I stared at the screen, waiting for the name, the thank you, the we that never came. He kept talking about his struggles, his music, his sacrifices. Not one word about the nights I stayed up editing. Not one mention of the woman who pawned her ring to pay for his mic. Then the host said, "And tell us, Michael, who's that lucky woman in your life?" "The fans are dying to know." He laughed, a smooth, practiced laugh. "I'm married to my work for now," he said. "Music is the only love I need." The audience cheered. My heart broke, clean and silent. I felt it snap inside me, like a string pulled too tight. He looked straight into the camera and smiled. That smile I used to wake up beside, and said, "When you want something bad enough, no one can stop you. Not even love." I felt the blood rush to my ears. The room around me blurred. I wanted to scream, "Not even love?" The applause thundered. He started his performance, the same song we wrote together on the back of an old receipt. He sang it like it was his alone. Not a trace of my name, not a hint of our story. When he hit the final note, the crowd stood and clapped, chanting his name. I stood too, but only because I couldn't breathe sitting down. Michael Roberts, my Michael, bowed to the audience, his hand over his heart, and mouthed, "Thank you," not to me. To them, I walked out of the green room before the show ended. The hallway was cold and bright, and I could see my reflection in the glass door, eyes red, face pale, holding the small purse that suddenly felt useless. Outside, the city lights blurred with the tears in my eyes. I heard the muffled sound of him singing again inside, louder, freer, as if I had never existed. I walked until my feet hurt. Each step felt like walking on the pieces of the dream we built together. When I reached our apartment, it felt smaller than ever. I sat on the couch where we once wrote lyrics together and looked at the list on the wall. Studio, car, tour, our own show. I ripped it down. Then I went to the shoebox. The one where I kept our messages, recordings, receipts, proof of a story he now called Just Me. I opened it and stared. My hands trembled, not with anger, but with something sharper, realization. I realized that sometimes love doesn't die when someone betrays you. It dies the moment you see them lying so easily that you wonder if they ever told the truth. That night, I didn't cry loudly. I sat in silence, listening to the echo of my own breathing. I remembered every moment I helped him, the shirts, the notes, the coffee, the prayers. Every act of love had become invisible, swallowed by his hunger for applause. I told myself two things. 1, this was the end of us. 2, this was not the end of me, because somewhere under that pain, something fierce was being born. Something patient. Something that would wait, plan, and one day speak. He thought fame had made him untouchable. He didn't know that I was still watching. He didn't know I had every file, every message, every lyric written in my notebook, with dates. He didn't know that I wasn't weak. He didn't know that the woman he erased from his story would become the reason his story ended. That night, I promised myself one thing. I would not destroy him with noise. I would undo him with truth, slowly, calmly, completely. And when the time came, I would not need to shout. Because the evidence would do the talking, louder than any applause. The night after the show, I learned that silence can be louder than screams. When Michael came home, I was sitting on the couch with the lights off. The TV was still playing reruns of his performance. Every few minutes, his face flashed across the screen, smiling, glowing, proud. I didn't turn it off. I wanted to feel the burn of those lies. He walked in like nothing had happened. "Did you see me?" he asked, grinning. They loved it. The producer said I might get a contract next week. I looked at him, trying to recognize the man I once loved. "You said you'd mention me," I whispered. He paused. For a moment, guilt flickered in his eyes, small, quick, gone. Then he shrugged. "Aaliya, it wasn't the right time. You know how these shows work. I had to focus on my story. It's just business." "Business?" I repeated. My voice cracked on the word. "Baby, don't make it a big deal," he said, walking past me. "We both know what we're building. When I'm in, we're in. Trust me, trust." That word felt like glass in my mouth. I wanted to throw the remote, to scream, to tell him how it felt to watch my name erased on live television. But instead, I sat still. My hands folded, my jaw tight. Silence settled between us like smoke. He didn't notice. He turned the water on in the bathroom, humming that same song, our song, now fully claimed as his. That night, I lay awake beside him. He slept deeply, his mouth open, soft snores breaking the quiet. I watched his chest rise and fall, and I realized something painful. The man I loved no longer existed. In his place was someone made of hunger and ambition, someone who saw me not as a partner but as a ladder. I turned away from him, stared at the wall, and made a decision. If he could lie with such calmness, I could learn to tell the truth with the same calm. I didn't know exactly how, but I knew I would not let my story die inside his shadow. The next morning, I got up before him. I cleaned the table, folded the blanket, and opened the shoebox where I kept everything. The notes, the voice memos, the receipts. I started to organize them by date. At first, it was just something to keep my hands busy, but as I arranged the papers, a strange peace came over me. Every photo, every message was proof. Proof of the woman he had erased. I opened my old notebook. On the first page, I wrote 4 words. "Silence is my weapon." From that day on, I spoke less and watched more. He noticed my quietness and mistook it for forgiveness. "See," he said one morning, "I knew you'd understand." I smiled faintly and nodded. He thought I was back to being the same Aaliya, the helper, the supporter. He didn't realize silence was where I healed and planned. Days passed. He grew busier. Photos of him with new faces began to fill social media. I saw him standing beside a woman with bright red lipstick and a glitter dress. The caption read, "The future of music. No tag." No mention of me. Each time I saw those pictures, I felt something twist inside me. Not jealousy, not even sadness anymore. Something colder. Something steady. I started saving screenshots. At night, I'd plug in his old laptop, the one he left behind because it was too slow, and copy files onto my drive. Old drafts, raw recordings, emails, timestamps. He never deleted anything properly. Every document told a story. How we built songs together, how I suggested changes, how he once wrote, "This line sounds better when Aaliya sings it." He forgot those words. I didn't. One evening, when he was out at another event, I sat at our kitchen table and listened to our earliest voice note. It was us laughing, practicing the chorus of "Shine With Me," the song that made him famous. My voice was louder in the recording, guiding, correcting, smiling. I cried listening to it, but the tears were different this time. They weren't weak. They were clean, like rain washing dirt off glass. That night, I wrote in my notebook again, "He taught me ambition. I'll teach him consequence." Weeks turned into months. He was on screens everywhere, interviews, short clips, music blogs. Each time he said, "I started from nothing," I whispered to myself, "You started from me." But I didn't rush. I waited, I watched. I learned. I started following pages about copyrights, about how creators could prove their ownership. I watched videos on contracts and intellectual property. Words like evidence, plagiarism, and legal claim began to make sense. The more I learned, the calmer I felt, because I understood something powerful. He had fame, but I had facts. And facts don't fade when the lights go out. One night, he came home drunk from an after-party. He threw his jacket on the chair and said, "Aaliya, they want me to sign with a label next week. Big money, big exposure." I looked at him, his face red from wine, his eyes glazed, and said softly, "That's great, Michael. Congratulations." He smiled, thinking I was proud. "You'll see, baby. We're almost there." "We are," I said. But what I meant was something else. He passed out soon after. I picked up his jacket from the chair and found a crumpled paper in the pocket, a contract draft. It had his signature, his name, and our song title printed under "Written by Michael Roberts." Just him. No me. I folded the paper carefully, placed it in my notebook, and wrote beneath it, "The moment he erased me, he signed his own ending." From then on, my silence became routine. He traveled more, smiled more, lied more. I listened, nodded, and smiled back. But behind that quiet face, I was building something solid. Every lie he told added one more brick to my foundation of truth. Every show he performed made the final reveal worth more. Every time he said me, I heard we. And I kept proof. I stopped crying. I stopped waiting for apologies. I stopped believing his trust me, because now I trusted myself. And when you start trusting your own power, silence stops being emptiness. It becomes preparation. That's what I was doing, preparing for the day when the truth would stand tall and every lie would crumble in front of the same cameras that once erased me. And when that day came, I promised myself I would not shout or curse. I would just smile, the same calm smile he used on stage, and let the truth play out. Because the best revenge is not rage, it's patience. Perfectly timed, perfectly planned, and perfectly quiet. The day I finally decided to move on wasn't marked by some big dramatic moment. There was no shouting, no slamming of doors. It was an ordinary morning. The sun came through the window like it always did, lighting up the dust floating in the air. Michael was gone on another important meeting, and the silence of our apartment felt heavy, not empty, but waiting. I stood in front of the mirror, looked at my tired face, and whispered to myself, You can start again. Those 4 words felt like a stranger's voice, but they woke something in me. I went into the kitchen, made coffee, and took out my notebook. On a clean page, I wrote, Step 1. Remember who you were before him. It was strange. I couldn't remember that easily. Before him, I had dreams, yes, but they had always included us. Now I had to dream for me. So I asked myself a question. If no one ever clapped for you again, would you still create? The answer was yes, because my art was never about applause. It was about honesty. That morning, I decided to open an online account, a small channel where I could teach people how to sing with emotion. I didn't have fancy lighting or a microphone anymore, but I had my phone, my voice, and my truth. The first video I made was simple. I sat near the window, sunlight on my face, and said, Hi, I'm Aaliya. I don't have a big stage or a big story right now, but I know how to help you sing from your soul. It was raw, unedited, real. I uploaded it with shaky hands and 0 expectations. For the first 3 days, no one watched. Then on the 4th day, a comment appeared. Thank you. You sound like you've lived what you teach. That comment made me cry. Not because it was grand, but because it was honest. Someone saw me. From there, I made another video and another. Each one was a small seed. People began to respond. Small messages, soft words, encouragement. I started to feel a spark again. I wasn't chasing fame. I was building peace. While Michael traveled to parties and events, I stayed home recording lessons. When he called, I answered politely, keeping my voice calm, detached. He thought I was still the same, waiting for him, loving him quietly. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I was working. Each day after work, I spent an hour learning. I read articles about artist rights. I watched tutorials about contracts and copyrights. I began to understand how the industry that broke me actually worked. And the more I learned, the less afraid I felt. One evening, I found a free webinar about proof of creation. They taught how timestamps, original drafts, and audio files could protect your work. I smiled. I already had those. For the first time in months, my silence didn't feel powerless. It felt strategic. That night, I created folders on my computer, original demos, lyrics notes, receipts and messages, interviews. I backed them up on a flash drive and hid it inside an old makeup box. No one would ever think to look there. Every file was a piece of my past. But together they formed something stronger. My truth. The next morning, I made another decision. I would no longer wait for him to give me credit. I would make my own name worth something. So I started small, offering free singing lessons to kids in my neighborhood. We used the park on weekends. Some of them couldn't afford instruments, so we clapped and used bottles as drums. The sound was rough but beautiful. It reminded me of my beginnings. Parents began thanking me. A few local pages shared my story. Young woman teaching music to kids for free. It wasn't fame, but it was light. And it was mine. Meanwhile, Michael's name kept growing online. He was doing interviews, standing on red carpets, wearing suits that didn't fit right because they were too new. I watched quietly, not with jealousy, but with curiosity. Because I knew that every lie stretched thinner with time. And thin things break easy. One night, while scrolling through his new interview, I saw something that made me freeze. He was singing our song again, Shine With Me. And this time he said, This track came to me one night when I couldn't sleep. I just felt something deep in my soul. That was my lyric, my moment. He took it and made it sound like divine inspiration. I didn't cry. I smiled. Because I remembered, I had the recording of that night, the one where my voice was the first to sing the hook. The timestamp was clear, the file untouched. He had no idea. He was building his tower of lies, and I had already collected the stones that would bring it down. Still, revenge wasn't the center of my life. Not yet. I had to fix myself first. There were nights when I broke down, missing the person I thought he was. Sometimes I'd catch myself scrolling through old photos, wondering how love could vanish so quietly. Then I'd whisper, "He didn't vanish. He transformed. And so must I." Slowly, my channel began to grow. One of my students posted a video of us singing together. It went mildly viral. Not millions, but enough that people noticed. They said things like, "She's so real and you can feel her pain in her voice." Those comments felt better than applause. They felt seen. My small online presence turned into a quiet following. People began to call me the honest voice. The name stuck. I wasn't famous, but I was free. Free from begging for credit. Free from waiting for someone else to recognize my worth. Every morning, I'd wake up, stretch, and write in my notebook. Step 2, build your world, not his. It became my mantra. And somewhere between teaching, learning, and healing, I realized my silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was power. Because silence gives you time. Time to grow, time to plan, time to prepare the truth. One day, that truth would walk into the light by itself, calm, undeniable, and sharp enough to cut through every lie he ever told. But until then, I'd keep taking small steps. Not loud ones, not dramatic ones, just steady, honest steps that led me toward the woman I was always meant to be. And when the day came to face him, I'd be standing tall, not as his ex, not as his shadow, but as the woman he tried to erase and failed. Because you can hide a name from the world, but you can't erase a voice that learned to sing again. The universe has a strange way of teaching you. First, it breaks you. Then it hands you the manual on how to rebuild. It started with an email from a woman named Maya Fields. She had watched one of my online lessons and sent a simple message. "Hi, Aaliya. Your voice moved me. I'm a lawyer who works with artists. If you ever need guidance about protecting your work, I'd be happy to help. Free of charge. Warmly, Maya." At first, I thought it was spam. Nobody offers lawyers for free. But something about her tone felt sincere. I looked her up. She was real, an entertainment lawyer who had represented independent Black artists trying to keep their rights. I took a deep breath and replied, "Thank you. I might actually need that." We met in a small coffee shop 2 weeks later. Maya was tall, with braids and sharp eyes that looked like they could see through contracts and lies in one glance. She shook my hand and said, "I watched your videos. You've got real emotion." "Protect that," I smiled, nervous. "I've been learning about copyrights, but it's confusing." She nodded. "It's supposed to be. That's how the system keeps poor artists quiet. But once you understand the rules, they can't silence you anymore." Those words hit me deep. For 2 hours, she explained the basics: ownership, intellectual property, authorship. She told me that the first person to create something and prove it with a timestamp, file, or message owns it. She said, "You don't need fame to prove truth. You need evidence, evidence." That word felt powerful. I went home that day with a notebook full of scribbles and a head full of clarity. I opened my laptop, plugged in the flash drive I'd hidden, and began organizing everything, properly this time. I created a new folder, Legal Proofs. Inside it, I saved every email where Michael had thanked me for writing a line, every voice note that started with him saying, "Aaliya, what do you think of this melody?" Every file was like a puzzle piece, Maya had told me. Always back it up in 3 places. So I did. One on my laptop, one on a cloud drive, and one on an old external hard drive I hid behind my mother's photo frame. For weeks, my evenings became study sessions. I watched legal webinars, took notes on copyright law, learned the meaning of derivative work and joint authorship. The more I learned, the angrier I got. Not blind anger, but sharp, focused anger. I realized how many people like me had been erased because they didn't know their rights. How easily charm and fame could steal what patience and love had built. I decided I wouldn't be one of them. During this time, Michael was everywhere. Talk shows, billboards, interviews. He'd flash that same smile, talking about his vision, his sound. Sometimes I'd pause the screen and whisper, "Our vision. Our sound." But instead of crying, I'd open another folder. I'd label another file. Proof was my therapy now. One evening, Maya called me. I have a friend, a journalist named Omar. He exposes ghostwriting and stolen credit in the music industry. Would you be open to meeting him? Not yet, I said. I'm not ready to go public. She respected that. That's wise. Timing matters. Gather everything first. When you're ready, truth will make noise on its own. That sentence, truth will make noise on its own, became my new mantra. Weeks passed. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I typed Michael Roberts controversy into the search bar. Nothing came up. Clean image. Perfect reputation, I smiled. Enjoy it while it lasts, I whispered, because now I was playing the long game. Around that same time, my online channel was growing. People were commenting things like, Aaliya, your story gives me strength. Your lessons helped me write my first song. They didn't know the full story behind my calmness, but they could feel something real, and every kind word from a stranger built me back stronger than his betrayal ever broke me. One afternoon, while teaching a young girl named Naomi, she asked me, Miss Aaliya, why do you sound sad when you sing happy songs? Her question stopped me cold. I smiled and said, because sometimes happiness and pain share the same key. That night, I wrote a new song. Not for fame, not for anyone, just for myself. I called it The Quiet Fire. It was about rising from ashes while pretending you're fine. I recorded a rough demo and uploaded it anonymously. Within days, it caught small traction. A few hundred people commented that it felt like healing. Little did I know Michael's label would later try to buy the rights to that song too. But by then I'd be ready. Maya helped me register my work officially. She guided me through every form, every signature. When it was done, I had my first legal certificate in my own name. Aaliya Johnson, author and composer. I held it like a baby. Because that paper wasn't just a document. It was justice in print. I took a photo of it and sent it to Maya with a message. Thank you for teaching me how to protect myself. She replied, Don't thank me yet. You're only at the beginning. Justice is a journey, not a destination. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time in months, but even in that peace, I stayed alert. I knew Michael's world was built on fragile lies, and fragile things fall fastest when touched by truth. Every file I saved, every law I learned, every silent night I endured, it was building towards something inevitable. I didn't want revenge out of hate. I wanted it out of balance. To make the world remember that behind every bright stage is someone in the shadows holding the light steady. I was done holding it for him. Now, I was learning how to shine for myself and how to make sure no one could steal that light again. And when the day came to reveal the truth, I wouldn't do it with anger or shouting. I'd do it the way the truth always wins. Quietly, clearly, and with receipts. Because in a world that worships fame, the most dangerous thing you can ever hold is proof. They say grief changes you in two ways. It either breaks you or builds you. For a long time, I thought it had broken me. But as the months passed, I realized something deeper. I wasn't broken. I was becoming healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or applause. It's slow, like a seed pushing through the dirt, silent but determined. That's how it began for me. There were mornings I woke up and didn't feel heavy anymore. I still thought of him, but the thoughts no longer burned. They simply passed through me like old wind. His voice on TV didn't sting the same way. In fact, sometimes when I heard him speak, I felt pity. He was everywhere, magazines, interviews, panels, yet his words had started sounding empty. I could see the fatigue behind his eyes, the pressure of keeping up a lie. That's the thing about false stories, they're hard to maintain. Truth sleeps easily at night. Lies keep you awake, and me? I was finally sleeping. I had rebuilt my routine. Morning tea, meditation, recording lessons for my students. Each day had purpose again. But more than that, I started finding myself again. I began to sing, not for lessons, not for views, just for me. Sometimes at night I'd sing softly by the window, letting my voice rise into the quiet city air. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. The sound was different now, heavier, wiser, almost sacred. One night while singing, I caught my reflection in the window. My face had changed. There was strength in my eyes that I didn't recognize. That's when I whispered to myself, "You're not the same woman who cried on that couch. You're becoming something sharper." That realization scared me and thrilled me, because for the first time I understood that pain could be recycled. It didn't have to end as sorrow. It could be shaped into something useful. Purpose. Around that time, Maya invited me to a small networking event for independent creators. I almost said no. I didn't want to be around strangers or fake smiles. But something told me to go. The event was held in a modest art gallery, full of people who looked tired but hopeful. I met singers, painters, writers, all struggling, all trying to be heard. I shared my story in fragments, no names, just truths. When I said, "I used to help someone build their dream until I realized I had one too," people nodded. They understood. A young poet said to me, "You speak like someone who's been through fire and came out shining." Her words stuck. That night, I walked home under the streetlights and thought about fire. Fire destroys, yes, but it also purifies. Maybe that's what this whole thing was, purification. Burning away the old version of me that thought silence meant weakness. The version that thought love had to mean sacrifice. I was done being a quiet supporter. I wanted to be the author of my own narrative, even if it scared me. Maya once told me, "You don't have to shout to make impact. You just have to be undeniable." Those words became a compass. So I started shaping my story, carefully, patiently. I went through every old email, every photo, every note. But this time I wasn't looking for pain. I was looking for patterns. How he moved. How he lied. How he erased. The more I saw, the more control I felt. Because knowing the truth, fully, clearly, gives you peace. I began journaling again. But instead of heartbreak entries, I wrote lessons. I titled them "What the Storm Taught Me." Lesson 1. Don't fight lies with noise. Fight them with receipts. Lesson 2. Never expect honesty from someone who fears your memory. Lesson 3. Silence is not surrender. It's strategy. Lesson 4. The best revenge is becoming untouchable. Each lesson felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I stopped dressing to hide my pain. I started wearing colors again, bright ones, bold ones. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw less of his reflection and more of mine. Still, I kept tabs on him. Not out of obsession, but observation. I followed his public moves, saved clips, watched patterns. He was getting reckless and too confident. The higher he rose, the thinner the ground beneath him became. One evening, Maya and I sat at her office sipping tea. She said, "You're quieter these days." I smiled. "That's because I'm learning patience. The kind that ends stories." She raised an eyebrow. "You planning something?" I looked at her, my voice calm. "I'm preparing something." Truth doesn't need plans. It just needs timing, she smiled. Then time is on your side. And she was right. The universe, it seems, rewards patience. Especially when you're not chasing revenge out of hate, but out of justice. My channel crossed 50,000 followers that month. I celebrated alone, quietly, with cheap wine and loud music. Not because of the numbers, but because I had done it without shortcuts, without lies, without him. For the first time, I didn't feel like the woman he left. I felt like the woman he could never replace. That's the funny thing about inner shifts. They don't show on the outside right away. People still saw the same Aaliya, soft-spoken, calm, collected. But inside me, something new had taken root. Clarity, and clarity is the beginning of power. Because when you stop crying over what broke you and start studying it, you stop being the victim. You become the strategist. I wasn't just healing anymore. I was preparing. Preparing for the moment the truth would walk out into the world. Not with a scream, but with evidence, grace, and timing. The moment when his stage lights would flicker, and my silence would finally speak. I could almost feel it coming. Not soon, but soon enough. I didn't know exactly how the truth would unfold yet. But I knew when it did, it would be calm, clean, and final. Because I wasn't the same woman who needed to be saved. I was now the woman who ended the lies, and that to me was more powerful than revenge. It was transformation. By the time I reached the point where my heart no longer trembled at his name, I knew I was ready. Not for confrontation, not yet, but for something more subtle, more dangerous. Planting the truth. Maya always said, "The best stories are told one truth at a time." Let people connect the dots themselves. So that's what I did. It started with a small interview. A local podcast called Artists in Progress invited me to speak. They had seen my channel and loved how authentic my lessons felt. I almost said no. The word interview still reminded me of his smile under stage lights. But something told me to go. The host was a kind man with gentle eyes. He asked about my music journey, how I began, what inspired me. I answered truthfully, not with anger but with honesty. I started with someone, I said. We built everything together. But sometimes when one person gets lost in the noise of fame, the other becomes invisible. And invisibility teaches you two things, how to see clearly and how to rise quietly. The room went still. The host leaned forward. Did you ever confront them? I smiled softly. No, because the truth doesn't need a fight. It just needs time. That clip went viral. Not millions of views, but enough to start whispers. People commented, "This sounds familiar. She's talking about Michael Roberts, isn't she?" I didn't confirm. I didn't deny. I just kept moving. That was the beauty of planting seeds. You don't have to announce what you're growing. You just water it with consistency. I made another video, this time on my own channel, titled The Cost of Silence. In it, I said, sometimes helping someone means giving away your ideas, your energy, your time. But when they use it to build themselves and erase you, don't rush to shout. Keep your records, keep your calm. Because proof is the language of patience. The comments poured in. People related, artists, ex-partners, creators who had been taken advantage of. They called me wise, peaceful, dangerous in the best way. And slowly, without naming names, I was telling my story. Truth wrapped in calmness. A few weeks later, I got a message from the same journalist Maya had mentioned months ago. Omar. Hi, Aaliya. I've been following your content. You speak with grace about injustice. I suspect there's a larger story here. If you ever want it told properly, I'll give you full control over how it's written. No pressure. Just respect. Omar. I stared at that message for a long time. A part of me wanted to send everything. Right then. Every file, every recording, every lie he'd told. But another part whispered, not yet. I replied simply, thank you, Omar. I will reach out when the time is right. Because timing, I had learned, is more important than truth itself. Meanwhile, Michael's career was booming, but cracks were beginning to show. His live performances were flawless, but fans were noticing inconsistencies in his interviews. He'd tell one version of his origin story on one channel, then a slightly different version on another. People started comparing clips, noticing little differences. I didn't need to do anything. His own words were starting to betray him, but I decided to help the process, gently. I posted a short reel. It was just an old audio snippet, me singing a rough draft of a song we'd written years ago, one that had since become his hit. I captioned it simply. Funny how memories echo louder than applause. The post caught fire. Comments flooded in. Wait, This sounds like Michael Roberts' track. She wrote it first? Something's not right here. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Within days, gossip blogs picked it up. Who really wrote Michael Roberts' biggest hit? It wasn't an accusation. It was a question. And questions, when asked enough times, start to sound like truth. Michael posted a video soon after, smiling, laughing it off. People always try to take credit when you make it big, he said. It's part of success. I watched it with a calm smile, because denial is predictable, and proof is patient. I met Maya that week at her office. She looked proud. You've got the internet buzzing, girl. I didn't say a word, I said. She smiled. You didn't have to. You just dropped a seed and walked away. That's how truth grows. We spent hours reviewing my documents again, making sure everything was dated, labeled, verified. She said, when the storm hits, you'll need to be ready with clarity. No emotion, no chaos, just evidence. I nodded. I'm ready. But deep inside, I knew something. I wasn't just doing this for revenge anymore. I was doing it for every woman who had ever been erased, every artist who had ever been silenced, every person who had ever been used and then forgotten. Because fame fades fast, but injustice leaves deep fingerprints. A week later, I was invited to speak at a small conference for young creators. I stood on stage, the same kind of stage that once made me tremble, and told my truth, indirectly, but powerfully. I said, never give your light to someone who doesn't know how to share it. And if they try to dim yours, learn how to shine in silence. Because silence doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're building strength they can't see. The audience was quiet, then erupted in applause. That sound was different from the noise I once chased. It wasn't fame. It was respect. That night, I went home, opened my notebook, and wrote, Phase 1, complete. The truth has begun to breathe. I didn't need to rush. The seeds were planted, the ground was fertile, and soon, very soon, the world would see what had been hidden. For now, I'd keep watering those seeds, with patience, with calmness, and with unshakable proof. Because revenge doesn't need to shout. It just needs to grow roots deep enough that when it blooms, no one can deny where it came from. There comes a moment when silence is no longer peace and it becomes pressure. You can feel it sitting under your ribs, heavy and full, waiting to burst. For months, I had planted seeds, watched whispers turn into questions, and seen doubt begin to grow around Michael's name. But now, the time had come for truth to walk on its own feet. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about release, freeing myself from a lie that had grown too large to hide under patience. I remember the exact night I decided to act. I was sitting at my desk, reviewing old files when a notification popped up, a live interview with Michael. He was on a big network, dressed sharp, smiling like sin wrapped in silk. The interviewer said, "You've inspired so many, Michael. Tell us again how you started." "It's such a beautiful story," he laughed. "Yeah, it was just me in my little apartment, no support, no help, just a dream." I froze. No support, no help. The same man who once cried in my lap when auditions rejected him was now rewriting the past like I never existed. He continued, "People think I had a team, but nah, it's all self-made." I closed my laptop slowly. My heart wasn't racing this time. It was calm, steady. Because now, the truth wasn't just memory. It was evidence. I picked up my phone and called Maya. "It's time," I said simply. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Okay, let's do this the right way." The next morning, I sat in her office, a small recorder on the table, stacks of files neatly arranged beside it, emails, audio clips, screenshots, receipts. Everything was labeled with dates, printed and signed. "This," she said, tapping the stack gently, "is a truth bomb. Once it goes out, there's no going back. You sure you're ready?" I looked at her and smiled. I've been ready since the night he said my name wasn't worth mentioning. She nodded. Then we release it clean, no drama, no slander, just facts. That afternoon we worked like surgeons. Maya called Omar, the journalist who'd reached out before. He joined us in the meeting room, recorder on, his eyes sharp but kind. He asked me to tell my story from the beginning. I did. From the first song, to the show, to the silence. No tears this time, no anger, just truth. When I finished, the room was quiet. Omar said softly, "You know, this will blow up, right?" I shrugged. "Then let it. I've lived quiet long enough." 3 days later, the article went live. It wasn't titled with gossip or hate. It was clean, powerful, impossible to ignore. The voice behind the silence, Aaliya Johnson, breaks her truth. The piece opened with a short description of my background, my work with children, my channel, and then the evidence. Screenshots of messages, time-stamped audio clips. A recording where Michael literally said, "Let's use your line." It sounds more heartfelt. Every file was verified by lawyers. Every date matched perfectly. It wasn't noise. It was precision, and the internet did the rest. Within hours, my phone exploded. Hundreds of messages, comments, notifications. People were stunned. Fans who once praised him were asking questions. Wait, didn't he say he wrote this alone? Why is her voice on the demo? How could he erase her? Some defended him, of course. But truth doesn't need everyone, just enough eyes willing to see. By the next morning, the article had been shared thousands of times. Major pages picked it up. Talk shows mentioned it. Michael Roberts facing accusations of false credit. Those were the headlines. I watched from my couch, the same couch where I had once cried in silence. Now I sat upright, calm, holding my tea like a queen holding a crown she earned. Maya called me mid-morning. "You did it," she said. "It's everywhere." "I didn't do anything," I said quietly. "The truth just came home." Michael's response came 24 hours later, a shaky video statement on his social media. He looked tired, defensive, unprepared. He said, "I've always given credit where it's due. Some people are just trying to bring me down." But his tone betrayed him. There was no confidence, no charm, just panic hidden behind performance. He tried to laugh it off, but people had already seen the evidence. They replayed his interviews next to my files, compared the timelines, the lyrics, the receipts. The internet became its own courtroom, and truth was the only witness it needed. Even his own fans began saying, "If this is true, he owes her everything." Sponsors paused collaborations. The label that had once praised him went silent. Rumors spread that contracts were being reviewed, all while I stayed quiet. I didn't post victory statements. I didn't attack. I simply uploaded one simple video on my channel. It was just me sitting at my desk, looking straight into the camera. I said, "Sometimes the world gives the microphone to the wrong person. But that's okay, because eventually, the truth finds its own stage." Thank you to everyone who believes in honesty more than fame. Let's keep building spaces where voices can't be stolen. No names, no blame. Just peace, the kind that hurts more than shouting ever could. The video ended with a soft smile. I didn't have to say his name. The world already knew. That night, as I scrolled through the flood of support, one message stood out. It was from Naomi, the little girl I used to teach in the park. She wrote, "Miss Aaliya, I always knew your voice would be too strong to stay quiet." I cried. Not the painful tears from before, but tears of release. The kind that wash away what's left of grief, because that was the turning point. The world had finally seen what I saw all along, that fame built on lies is temporary. But truth lasts forever. When I closed my laptop that night, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt light. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting to be seen. I was seen, and not because of revenge, not because of hate, but because I refused to let silence be mistaken for defeat. Michael could keep the lights, the cameras, the stage. I had something better: credibility. And credibility doesn't fade when the spotlight turns off. I used to imagine revenge as fire, loud, bright, destructive. But when it finally came, it looked nothing like that. It was quiet, almost gentle, like the slow crumbling of something that was never meant to stand tall. The days after the article went live were strange. My phone buzzed nonstop: interviews, podcasts, journalists asking for more details. I ignored most of them. I didn't want the noise. I wanted peace, but peace, I learned, can coexist with justice. I woke up one morning to headlines that read, Michael Roberts, label suspends all promotions. Evidence suggests co-writing claims were ignored. Fans demand apology from Michael Roberts. I sat at my kitchen table sipping tea and read every line slowly. It felt surreal. For so long, he had been the untouchable one, the man everyone adored, the face everyone trusted. Now, his own success was turning against him, like a house of mirrors collapsing inward. The internet moved fast. Old interviews resurfaced, clips where he contradicted himself. In one, he said, "I wrote that song in one night." In another, he said, "It took months of back and forth with my team. People noticed." They compared. They questioned. I didn't have to say anything. The truth had become a living thing. It was doing the work for me. Sponsors started quietly deleting posts featuring him. A brand he represented released a statement: "We value integrity and transparency. Until further clarification, our partnership with Mr. Roberts is on hold." That word, integrity, was delicious. I didn't dance. I didn't celebrate. I just watched. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive with noise. It arrives with silence that shakes the ground. A week later, a news anchor mentioned my name for the first time on live television: Aaliya Johnson, the woman whose quiet courage exposed a truth many suspected, but few dared to say. Hearing my name like that felt strange, like stepping into sunlight after years underground. But it wasn't pride that filled me. It was relief. I had waited so long to be seen. Now I was, not as a victim, but as a voice. Michael tried to fight back, of course. He posted long captions, saying things like, "People twist words for attention. I'll clear this up soon." But his words sounded hollow. You can't out-talk evidence. You can't charm your way out of proof. His team tried damage control, deleting comments, turning off replies, limiting visibility. But the internet is smarter than that. The more you hide, the louder people search. I scrolled through one comment section. Thousands of people debating, dissecting, demanding answers. A fan wrote, "If she has the recordings, then he lied. Period." Another replied, "It's always the quiet ones who bring truth." I smiled softly. Because yes, that was me now. The quiet one who waited, who watched, who endured. Then came the real crack in his empire. A producer, someone high up in the industry, released a statement saying he'd witnessed early sessions where both names were involved. Another former collaborator confirmed, I'd been part of the songwriting process. When one person tells the truth, people hesitate. When 3 people tell the truth, the dam breaks. Suddenly, everyone had a story. Stories about his arrogance, his manipulation, his charm that soured once he got what he wanted. The golden boy of music was now the headline of Scandal, and I didn't have to lift a finger. I remember walking through a grocery store one afternoon and hearing 2 women talking in front of me. "Did you see that singer, Michael something?" one said. "Turns out he stole songs." The other shook her head. I knew he looked too slick to be real. They didn't even notice me. I just smiled behind them, pushed my cart, and thought, the universe keeps receipts too. But fame doesn't die in a single day. It fades, painfully, publicly, piece by piece. A few die-hard fans stayed loyal. They wrote long posts defending him, calling me names, saying I just wanted attention. At first it hurt. Then I realized why their anger wasn't really about me. It was about losing an illusion they loved. They needed time to accept the truth, too. Maya told me to avoid reading too many comments. Justice is heavy, she said. You can drown in your own victory if you're not careful. She was right. So I started spending my time differently. I focused on my students again, my community, my small online family who believed in me before the headlines. Every day I received messages from artists saying things like, "You gave me courage to claim my work. I registered my songs because of you. Thank you for showing us it's okay to speak, even quietly." Those messages mattered more than the downfall of one man. Because revenge is temporary. But impact lasts. Still, I won't pretend there wasn't satisfaction. There was a deep, calm satisfaction, the kind that comes from balance being restored. I remember the first night I watched one of his concerts after the scandal broke. The hall wasn't full anymore. Fans were quiet. His voice cracked halfway through a song, our song. He looked nervous, lost, unsure. The same stage that once worshipped him now questioned him, and as I watched from the live stream, I whispered softly, "Now you know how it feels to be invisible." It wasn't spite. It was symmetry. People kept asking if I'd ever forgive him. I didn't have an answer then. Because forgiveness, I realized, isn't something you give someone else. It's something you give yourself, the moment you stop carrying the weight of their betrayal. And by then, that weight was gone. He lost his contracts. His fame dimmed. His team shrank. He went from rising star to controversial figure in less than a month. And I stayed silent through all of it, because true justice doesn't scream. It whispers, "I told you the truth. You just didn't listen." That was enough for me. That night before bed, I opened my notebook. The same one I'd filled with lessons and plans. On a new page, I wrote, Lesson 10, the truth doesn't rush. It arrives exactly when pride is at its peak. I closed the book and smiled, because the fall wasn't my victory. It was his mirror. He finally saw what I saw years ago, himself, stripped of the applause, standing in the silence he once left me in. And now, the world knew it too. When the noise finally died down, I was left with something I hadn't expected. Silence again. But this time it was different. It wasn't heavy like before. It wasn't the silence of being erased. It was the silence of peace. Michael's fall had come and gone. The world had moved on to its next scandal, as it always does. People forgot the details, the debates, the hashtags. But I didn't mind, because my name, my truth, was finally where it belonged. I woke up one morning, looked at the sunlight crawling across my apartment floor, and realized I didn't feel angry anymore. For the first time in years, my chest wasn't tight. No bitterness, no weight, just calm. That's the strange thing about healing. It doesn't come with applause. It comes with quiet mornings, deep breaths, and small smiles you don't even notice. I spent those early weeks after the storm rebuilding my days. I went back to the park where I used to teach kids how to sing. Some of them were still there, waiting, waving when they saw me. "Miss Aaliya," Naomi shouted, running up to me. She hugged me so tight I almost lost my balance. "I told you we'd sing again," I said, laughing. Her smile was wide and pure. That's when it hit me. This was what mattered. Not fame, not followers, not revenge. Just moments like this. Honest, human, full of love that didn't demand to be seen. I began organizing free workshops for young artists in the neighborhood. We'd sit in circles under the trees, sharing songs, poems, and stories. I taught them about voice control, yes, but also about something deeper, ownership. Keep your proof, I'd tell them. Protect your art. Don't sign anything you don't understand. They listened closely, eyes wide. Sometimes I saw flashes of myself in them. The same hunger, the same hope. And I prayed they'd never have to learn the hard way like I did. I invited Maya one weekend to talk to them about copyrights. She stood before those kids like a warrior in heels, explaining their rights in plain language. Afterward, she turned to me and said, "You're doing something big here, Aaliya. Bigger than revenge, I smiled. Maybe this was always the plan. Maybe I had to go through the darkness so I could show others the way out. She nodded. Sometimes God uses pain as a teacher. You listened. Her words settled deep in my chest. A few weeks later, I received an email that surprised me. It was from Michael. Aaliya, I don't know how to start this. You don't owe me anything, but I need to say it. I was wrong. About everything. About you, about us. I lost everything chasing a version of success that wasn't real. I'm sorry. You were always the real thing. Michael, I stared at the message for a long time. Once upon a time, I would have dreamed of these words. Now they felt small. Not meaningless, just late. I didn't reply right away. I let it sit in my inbox for days, like an old song you don't have the heart to replay. One night, after a long day of teaching, I finally wrote back. Michael, I accept your apology. But forgiveness isn't for you, it's for me. I've already moved on. I hope you find peace too. Aaliya, I sent it and felt a strange sense of closure. Not triumph. Not bitterness. Just peace. Because forgiveness isn't saying you deserve another chance. It's saying I deserve freedom from this pain. And I did. As months passed, life found a new rhythm. My channel grew, not from scandal, but from substance. People came not to hear about him, but to learn, to heal, to grow. I started writing again, my own songs this time. One in particular, Rise in Silence, became special. It was about letting go without losing yourself. When I performed it live for the first time, just me, a microphone, and a small crowd, I cried midway through. Not from sadness, but gratitude. Because I realized that everything I'd lost had made space for everything I'd become. After the performance, an older woman came up to me. She took my hand and said, "You remind me of every woman who's ever had her story stolen. Thank you for taking it back for all of us." I smiled and hugged her. That moment felt like an award, better than any trophy, any stage. People sometimes asked me, "Would you ever work in the industry again?" I always laughed softly and said, "I never left." I just started telling the truth this time, and that's the thing. Truth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stands tall, quiet, unshakable. Michael's face still appeared now and then on smaller platforms. Humbled, apologetic, no longer shining. I didn't hate him. I didn't wish him harm. I just hoped he'd learned something, because real growth doesn't come from applause. It comes from losing everything false, until all that's left is what's real. And for me, that was this. My voice. My peace. My purpose. One night I sat by the window holding my notebook, the same one that once held plans for revenge. The pages were full now, not of anger, but lessons. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, Lesson 11. Healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without bleeding. I stared at those words for a long time, smiling softly. The city outside was alive. Cars, laughter, music from open windows. Life had gone on. So had I. I closed my notebook, turned off the light, and whispered into the dark. Thank you for the silence. Because that silence, and the one that once crushed me, had turned into my greatest teacher. It taught me patience, clarity, and strength. It showed me how to rebuild from ashes without losing grace, and that I realized was the real victory. Not making him fall, but learning how to rise, quietly, beautifully, and on my own. Some mornings now I wake up before sunrise just to hear the city breathe. The world sounds different when you no longer carry a storm inside you. Back then, silence used to hurt. Now it feels like music. I make coffee, open the curtains, and watch light spill across my small apartment, my own apartment. Not the one I once shared with broken promises and borrowed dreams. This one smells like peace and fresh paint. The walls are lined with photos of my students, framed lyrics, and little drawings the kids in my workshops give me. Every corner whispers, "You made this yourself." It's been over a year since everything came crashing down for Michael. I heard through friends that he moved to another city, smaller shows, Fewer crowds, more humility. I don't follow him anymore. The chapter is closed. But sometimes, when I see his face pop up online, I feel no anger, no ache, only distance. It's like watching an old movie you've outgrown. My life, though, has become bigger, fuller. After the scandal faded, opportunities began to appear. Not fast, not loud, but real. A small music school invited me to run a weekend program for young singers. A nonprofit offered to fund my Voice and Vision project, helping Black girls learn creative ownership. And Maya, my guardian angel in heels, helped me register my foundation officially. The Honest Voice Initiative. The name felt perfect. Because that's what I had become. A voice that refused to lie, that refused to be silenced again. The first day of our new program, I stood in front of 20 bright, nervous faces, some shy, some excited, all full of dreams. "Welcome," I said, smiling. "Here, we learn two things, how to sing and how to never give away your story." Their laughter filled the room like music. That sound, pure, fearless, alive, reminded me why I fought so hard. It wasn't just for me. It was for them. We wrote songs together about family, love, loss, and hope. One of the girls, Amara, wrote a chorus that said, "My voice is mine, and that's enough." When she sang it, I felt tears rise behind my eyes. Because she had said in one line what had taken me years to learn. My online platform grew quietly alongside the foundation. Not from pity or scandal, but from respect. People began calling me the mentor of truth. Big artists reached out, collaborations, features, interviews. Some of them even admitted they'd once believed Michael's version of the story. Now they wanted to work with me. I accepted only a few offers, the ones that aligned with my values. No flashing lights, no fake promises. Just music, honesty, and purpose. One evening, I performed at a charity concert, my first big stage since everything. Standing under those lights again felt surreal. But this time, the spotlight didn't scare me. It felt warm, not blinding. Before I sang, I took a moment, looked at the audience, and said, "There was a time I thought losing everything meant losing myself. But sometimes life takes away what's false to give you what's real." This song is for anyone who's ever been silenced. Your voice matters, even when no one claps. Sing anyway. Then I sang Rise in Silence. When the chorus hit, people stood, not screaming, not flashing phones, but quietly, respectfully. Some cried. Some closed their eyes. It was the kind of applause that didn't need noise. It felt like understanding. After the show, an older man came up to me and said, "Your story reminded me of my daughter. She gave up music after someone took credit for her work. Tonight, I'm telling her to start again." That moment meant more than any award could. Later that week, Maya and I met for dinner. She raised her glass and said, "To beginnings that come disguised as endings," I laughed. "To storms that water the right seeds," she nodded. "You know, Aaliya, you've done more than clear your name. You've changed the conversation. Artists talk about ownership now because of you." Her words filled me with quiet pride. I realized I had achieved something bigger than revenge. I had turned my pain into protection, not just for me, but for others. One night, after a long day of classes, I came home, made tea, and opened my old notebook. The same one that once held anger, evidence, and heartbreak. Now it was filled with lesson plans, melodies, and affirmations. But near the back, I found one empty page left. I took my pen and wrote. Lesson 12. Sometimes God lets you lose what you thought you needed, so you can find what you were born for. I stared at the words for a long time, then smiled, because that was my story in a single sentence. Every so often, I still visit the church basement where Michael and I first met. It's changed and brighter now, renovated. A new generation of singers practices there. They don't know who I am. They just call me Miss Aaliya when I walk by. And I like it that way. One evening, I sat at the back while a young man sang one of my songs from YouTube. He didn't know it was mine, and that was okay. Because it wasn't about credit anymore. It was about connection. I closed my eyes and listened. His voice was raw, full of hope, unpolished but real. It reminded me of who I used to be, before fame, before pain, before all the noise. Back when it was just music and love, and in that moment I realized I hadn't lost that girl. She'd just grown up. She'd learned her worth, her strength, her purpose. As I left that night, the city was alive. Laughter spilling from cafes, music drifting from cars, rain beginning to fall. I lifted my face to the sky, let the drops touch my skin, and whispered, "Thank you for everything, even the hurt, because the hurt made me honest. The betrayal made me wise. And the silence made me powerful. I didn't just rise after the fall. I built wings from the wreckage. Now, every time I stand before my students or step into a studio, I carry one truth in my heart. No one can steal what's truly yours, not if you know who you are, and I do. My name is Aaliya Johnson. I was once erased. Now I'm written in my own ink, and this time, no one gets to hold the pen but me. I had imagined that moment 1,000 times in my head. Sometimes I pictured him on his knees begging for forgiveness. Sometimes I thought I would scream and call his name until the whole room knew what he had done. But life rarely gives you the scenes you rehearse. It gives you moments that are quieter and, oddly, truer. It was a rainy Tuesday when he walked into my studio. I was teaching a small class, 5 teenagers, all nervous hands and big dreams. We were running a rhythm exercise when the door opened. I saw him in the doorway first, taller than I remembered, thinner in the face, eyes older, clothes simple. No cameras, no manager. Just him, holding a small paper bag like it was a peace offering. For a second, time felt fragile, like a thin glass ornament wavering on a string. My breath slowed. The students froze. I felt their eyes on me, sensing a story. I kept my voice calm. "Class," I said, "we'll take a 5-minute break." He walked toward me as if every step cost him something. Up close, I could see the lines near his mouth, the tiredness that no stage light could hide. He looked like someone who had been practicing apologies. "Aaliya," he began, voice small. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I closed the door behind me and set my cup of tea down. The steam curled up like a small memory. I heard my heartbeat. It was steady. Not because I was not afraid, but because I had learned how to be still and strong in the storm. "Michael," I said simply. "You came." He placed the paper bag on my desk, and before I could stop him, he reached in and pulled out a folded note. "I wrote this," he said. "I thought maybe—" He stopped, swallowed, and looked at the floor. I didn't take the note. I didn't want the theatrics. "If you want to apologize, say it," I said. Not as a script. Not for the cameras. For me. He looked up, and for a moment I saw the boy I once knew. Unsure, scared, wanting to be loved. "Aaliya, I was wrong. I was selfish. I thought fame would fix everything. It didn't. I lost myself and I hurt you. I'm sorry." His words were simple. They were late, but they were true. I listened. I let him speak because listening was my way of deciding how to answer. He continued, "I see what you built. I see what you're doing with the kids. I read things. I tried to fix things, but it's not that easy. I don't want your pity. He paused, eyes wet. "I want you to know I'm sorry." I watched him. Part of me remembered the man who once sewed a torn hem by hand and hummed while he stitched. But another part, the part that had saved files, learned laws, and built a life, kept me steady. "Apology accepted?" I asked. He looked surprised. "You'll forgive me?" I thought about how long I had carried the hurt. I thought about the nights I had cried in the dark and the mornings I had trained myself to wake up and move forward. I thought about Naomi and the kids and the faces that had looked to me for strength. Forgiveness isn't a gift you hand out to make someone feel better. It is a space you give yourself so you stop being bound to their mistake. I forgive you, I said slowly. But forgiveness does not mean the past disappears. It means I will not carry your weight anymore. He nodded, relief and shame mixing on his face. I don't deserve it, he whispered. You don't, I agreed. Not yet. He flinched as if I'd struck him, and then he nodded again, deeper this time. What do you want from me? He asked. His voice was small, honest. I could have asked for a public apology, for credit, for a million things. I could have demanded he fix everything he had broken. Instead, I looked at him and said what I had learned over the past months. I want you to do 3 things, I said, and I spoke slowly so each word could land. 1, learn to tell the truth without people telling you to. 2, help the people you hurt quietly without a camera. 3, live with what you did and let it teach you. He listened like a man hoping to be a student again. I will, he said. I'll try. Good, I said. Then don't come here asking for forgiveness like it's a magic bandage. Come back when you've done the work. His eyes searched mine. What about the song? He asked suddenly. The credits? The label? I had already signed the papers months ago. The certificates in my drawer bore my name, legal and clean. I told him the credits are corrected. Contracts are clear. I didn't pursue ruin. I pursued clarity. The rest is in lawyers' hands now. I felt no desire to gloat. I only wanted to be honest. He swallowed, a small sound. I'll make it right, he promised. You will, I said. Not because I demand it, but because it's the right thing to do. He reached out as if for a handshake, then paused. Can I hug you? He asked, voice breaking. I looked at him. At the man who had been my friend, my partner, my heartbreak, my lesson. I weighed the years and the cost. I thought of the children I taught, the trust I rebuilt, the life I had made. I also thought about mercy, how it could be a bridge between what was and what could be. If you must, I said finally. But not like before. This will be a different kind of hug, one for closure, not for returning. He lowered his head and wrapped his arms around me. There was no grand crying, no collapsing. Just 2 people holding a moment that had been heavy for far too long. I felt his shoulders shake. I felt the boy he used to be soften and the man he could become tremble into being. I stepped back and gave him a small, gentle smile. When he left, the light from the window caught the dust in the air like tiny stars. He didn't beg. He didn't promise miracles. He walked away with his back straight and his steps uncertain, a better man in progress rather than a star in retreat. After he left, I sat down and opened my notebook. I wrote a new line at the top of a fresh page. Closure is not an ending. It's a new beginning. Then I closed the book and went back to my students. They were waiting, eyes bright and patient. For them, I was a teacher, a guide, not a headline. I walked into the room with the same calm I'd learned to carry all these months and said, "Ready?" "Let's sing," the students smiled. The music began. My voice rose, steady, clear, true. And in that sound, I felt everything come full circle. The hurt, the silence, the evidence, the fall, the forgiveness, and the wings I had built. After that day, I learned that closure doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with quiet. The studio felt lighter, like the air itself had been cleaned. The students noticed. They said I smiled more, that my voice had softened. They didn't know why, but I did. I had finally placed the last piece in a long, painful puzzle. I thought the story would end there. Me teaching, him rebuilding somewhere far away. But truth, like any power, comes with a price. The world always wants to know what happens after. And sometimes even victory asks for maintenance. A few weeks after Michael left my studio, the media tried to make our meeting into a show. Someone must have told them he'd visited. Headlines appeared again. Michael Roberts seeks forgiveness from Aaliya Johnson. Old lovers reunite in a twist of fate. I laughed when I saw it. Not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. The same world that had ignored my silence now wanted to turn my piece into entertainment. Maya called immediately. "Do you want to respond?" she asked. "No," I said. "They can tell stories. I'll keep living mine." That night, I went live on my channel, just me and my microphone. No makeup, no glamour. I looked straight into the lens and said, "People love headlines more than healing. But not everything that ends needs to be rewritten as drama. Sometimes the real story is what happens after. The peace, the purpose, the quiet growth. I met someone who once hurt me. I forgave him. That's it. The rest is life." I ended the stream there. The comments that followed were soft and kind. People thanked me for teaching them that forgiveness doesn't erase boundaries. It just erases poison. The next morning, I checked my channel analytics. I'd gained 20,000 new followers overnight. Not because of scandal, because of sincerity. That was the moment I understood something profound. Truth is not free. It costs you your comfort, your image, your patience. But once you pay that price, you own something priceless: peace. Maya and I kept in touch almost daily. She became more than my lawyer. She became my sister in faith. One evening over dinner, she said, "You know, Aaliya, there's something poetic about how it all turned out. You didn't destroy him. You simply told the truth, and the world decided what to do with it." I nodded. I used to want revenge. I thought it would make me feel strong. But I think I just wanted recognition and for someone to say, "I see you. You mattered. And now?" She asked. "Now I don't need anyone to say it," I said quietly. "I see myself. But peace doesn't mean you stop feeling." Some nights, memories still drifted in. Not the hurtful ones, but the small, tender pieces. The smell of his cologne on old jackets. The laughter over burnt toast. The candlelight rehearsals in our first apartment. The good things were real too, even if they were buried under betrayal. I didn't fight those memories anymore. I let them visit. Because healing doesn't mean forgetting what was beautiful. It means being strong enough to remember without bleeding. One night, I found an old voice memo while cleaning my files. It was us singing together. Our voices blended perfectly. His charm, my steadiness. It almost hurt how good it sounded. I listened once, smiled, and deleted it. Not out of hate, but because I didn't need it anymore. The music we made no longer belonged to the past. It had served its purpose, to teach me how to stand alone. Months passed. The Honest Voice initiative grew beyond what I could imagine. We opened 2 more community studios, one in Atlanta, one in Detroit. We gave free workshops to young artists, especially Black women who had been told to wait their turn or tone it down. We told them, don't wait for permission. Don't dim your light. Watching them find confidence was like watching flowers bloom in a field I once had to crawl through. Every success of theirs felt like reclaiming a piece of what I lost. And every time I saw their names on their own songs, it reminded me that truth multiplies when shared. Then one day, an invitation arrived. A music association was hosting an award ceremony, not for fame, but for advocacy and creative rights. They wanted to honor me. When I read the letter, I cried softly. Not out of shock, but gratitude. It wasn't the award itself that moved me. It was the reason behind it. They were recognizing honesty, the very thing I was once punished for. At the event, as I stood on stage, lights bright but gentle, I took a moment to look at the audience. Somewhere among them, I thought I saw Michael. I couldn't be sure, but I didn't look away. I simply smiled because it no longer mattered. I took the microphone and said, "People think truth ruins lives. But it doesn't, it cleans them. Sometimes that cleaning looks like chaos, but it's just transformation. Don't be afraid to tell your truth. It won't destroy you, it will free you." The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was warm. The kind that feels like understanding, not noise. That night, back home, I stood by the window again, the same habit I'd had since the beginning. Rain was falling lightly, tapping the glass. The city below was glowing. I whispered to the night, "Thank you for everything. The lies, the losses, the lessons. Because every wound had been a teacher. Every betrayal had been a builder. And every silence had been a seed. The price of truth was high. It cost me love, years, and innocence. But it bought me strength, clarity, and peace. And those things don't fade." I looked down at my reflection on the window. A woman who had once been erased, now whole, unshakable, radiant in her calm. Lesson 14, I whispered, writing it later in my notebook. Truth demands everything, but what it gives back is freedom. I closed the notebook, placed it beside my bed, and smiled. The night was quiet. For the first time in my life, the quiet didn't scare me. It felt like home. I never planned a grand finale for my story. Life isn't a movie. There's no orchestra waiting for a final note. But sometimes the universe still gives you a small, perfect closing scene, if you pay attention. It came on a Sunday afternoon. I had just finished a workshop and decided to take a long walk through my old neighborhood. The streets hadn't changed much. Cracked sidewalks, kids chasing each other with plastic bottles, gospel music spilling from open windows. The smell of frying onions in rain. My shoes knew every turn. At the corner stood the church basement where it had all begun. The door was open, and I could hear voices inside, young, hopeful voices rehearsing. I smiled. My feet moved before my thoughts caught up. Inside, the air was warm and thick with sound. A group of teenagers stood around a microphone, clapping in rhythm. One of them looked up and whispered, "Is that Miss Aaliya?" I nodded. "Don't stop. Keep going," they sang louder. Off-key, a little messy, absolutely beautiful. When they finished, the smallest one asked shyly, "Did we sound okay?" I laughed. "You sounded like the beginning of something." I walked to the back corner, the same place I used to stand when Michael first saw me. The paint was newer, but the feeling was the same, a space full of dreams. For a moment, I closed my eyes and saw us there again, two broke believers sharing one microphone and too many hopes. I whispered to that memory, "Thank you for teaching me who I am." Then I let it go. Outside, the sky was turning gold. The city hummed softly, alive but not rushed. I sat on the steps and pulled out my worn notebook. Only one page remained blank. I let the pen hover for a moment, then wrote slowly, Lesson 15. When you heal, go back and leave the door open for the next soul that needs a way out. I read it twice. The words felt right, like the final breath after a long song. A little girl from the choir came out holding a half-eaten cookie. "Miss Aaliya," she said, "why do you always write in that book?" "Because every story deserves to be remembered," I said. "Even the hard ones." She thought about that, then nodded solemnly. "Can I write one too someday?" "You already are," I said, tapping her heart. "You're living it." She giggled and ran back inside. As evening fell, I walked home slowly, watching the lights flicker on across the city. My phone buzzed with messages, students, friends, reporters, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The work, the noise, the battles, they could wait. Tonight was for peace. When I reached my apartment, I poured tea and set my notebook on the table. Its pages were filled with lessons, proof, pain, love, and finally, light. I tied a ribbon around it and placed it on the shelf next to a framed photo of my first class of students. That, I decided, would be my legacy. Not revenge, not scandal, but survival turned into guidance. Before bed, I opened the window. The night breeze carried the sound of distant music. Someone strumming a guitar, humming a tune I didn't know. I smiled. Somewhere another story was beginning. And for the first time, I didn't feel the need to be in it. I whispered into the quiet, "My name is Aaliya Johnson." I was once erased, then I learned to write myself back in. And now my story belongs to every woman who ever had to start over. The wind seemed to answer with a soft sigh, carrying my words into the city, into tomorrow. Then I turned off the light. The darkness was gentle, the silence kind, and the only sound left was my heart, steady, free, and finally at peace. A year passed before I realized the story had stopped belonging to just me. People still sent letters, handwritten, digital, folded into songs. They came from everywhere, small towns, cities, quiet apartments. Women, men, young artists, even older ones who had buried their dreams long ago. They all wrote the same thing in different ways. I found courage in your silence. I found strength in your calm. Your story taught me to start again. Every time I opened one of those messages, I felt something warm move through me. Not pride, not glory, but connection. That's what truth does when you share it without bitterness. It doesn't build followers. It builds bridges. The Honest Voice initiative had grown beyond anything I ever planned. What started as a single room with a secondhand keyboard had become a network of creative sanctuaries, places where people could make art without fear of being erased. Each wall was painted with one rule: tell the truth. Protect your work. Lift others. I traveled sometimes, not as a celebrity, but as a teacher. Each time I stood in front of a new group of faces, I saw versions of myself. Raw, hopeful, unpolished, brave. And each time I told them, your voice is a house. Don't let anyone live in it rent-free. They laughed, but they understood. I'd show them my old notebook, worn, full, edges soft from years of turning pages. I'd read them pieces of it, not for drama, but for wisdom. Lesson 10, I'd say. The truth doesn't rush. Lesson 14, I'd whisper. Truth demands everything, but it gives freedom. And finally, Lesson 15. When you heal, leave the door open for others. Those lines became their mantra. Some even tattooed them. One girl wrote to me that she had them framed above her bed. That letter stayed in my purse for months. A small reminder that pain can turn into purpose if you let it. One summer evening, Maya and I sat outside the Atlanta studio, watching the sunset smear the sky in orange and rose. We didn't talk much anymore about the past. There was nothing left to dissect. But that evening, she looked at me with a kind of quiet pride and said, "You know, Aaliya, what you built, it's bigger than revenge. You've created legacy," I smiled. Legacy, I repeated, tasting the word like honey. I used to think legacy was about being remembered. Now I think it's about what keeps growing when you're not watching, she laughed. That's why you're the poet and I'm the lawyer. We clinked glasses, hers of wine, mine of lemonade, and sat in content silence. In the distance, one of my students was rehearsing a song I hadn't heard before. Her voice was pure, trembling, but powerful. It rose into the golden air like a prayer answered. That's when I realized I didn't need stages or headlines anymore. My music had multiplied into others. My story had become soil for new dreams. A few months later, I visited my mother's house. She'd kept all my old photos, the ones of me and Michael too. I found one of us standing outside the church basement, young and foolish, laughing with rain in our hair. For a long moment, I stared at it. Then I slid it back into the box, kissed the top, and whispered, "Thank you for being the start." Because that's all the past ever is. A beginning, not a chain. Sometimes, when I perform now, I tell audiences something I learned through every bruise and lesson. Pain is a teacher. Silence is a classroom. And truth. Truth is the diploma you earn when you finally stop pretending you're okay. They always clap, but I never pause for long. Because applause isn't the point. Living is. A year after that, Rise in Silence hit 1 million streams. People celebrated online, tagged me, posted quotes. But that night, I turned off my phone early. I sat by my window again, the same one that had watched me cry, dream, fight, and heal. The city lights blinked like stars below. Rain began to fall, soft and slow. I whispered into the dark, "This is what peace sounds like." Then, for no reason other than gratitude, I opened my old notebook again. Every lesson was there, every scar turned into ink. I flipped to the very last page, the one I had left blank on purpose, and wrote, "When truth finally sets you free, don't build a throne, build a bridge." I closed the notebook, placed it beside my tea, and smiled. Because that's what this whole story had been about. Not just truth, not just revenge, but building bridges out of broken pieces, one strong enough for others to cross. And if anyone ever asks me now who I am, I say this: My name is Aaliya Johnson. I was betrayed, but I forgave. I was silenced, but I sang anyway. I was erased, but I wrote myself back in. And now I live not to be seen, but to make others believe they can start again. That's the legacy I leave. A legacy of light. And when the day comes for me to finally put down my pen, I know the echoes of my story will still whisper through someone else's courage. She rose in silence and taught us how to.